So today we'll learn about experimental probability and the difference between experimental probability and theoretical, which is what you learned last class. Experimental probability, somebody is going to do an event multiple times. They're actually doing something. They're not just calculating. And then from what they did, they're going to calculate how successful that particular trial was. So, for example, we have a coin toss happening. The coin toss happens 35 times, which means I should have 35 tick marks over here. Well, let's check. We've got 5, 10, 15, 20. So this is 20. 5, 10, 15. So yes, overall we have 35, right? Now, if overall your tick marks don't match how many times you were supposed to do that experiment, your experiment is a bad experiment. You did not do things right, okay? So Jim tossed a coin 35 times. He recorded whether the coin landed on heads or tails. And so this is what actually ended up happening. Every time the coin landed on heads, he marked that it landed there. Every time it landed on tails, he marked that it landed there. So now, how many times did it land on heads? Well, it landed on heads 20 times. How many times total did he throw the coin? He threw the coin total 35 times. So 20 out of 35 times landed on heads. All right. For tails, 15 out of 35 times landed on tails, right? So I'm just using my total numbers for this and calculating total number of tails divided by total number of trials, total number of heads divided by total number of trials, all right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I want to get this in a decimal form to the nearest hundredth so that we can actually compare these. It's okay to compare with like under 35, but I want to compare it to my theoretical probability, and it's harder to do when it's in a fraction form. So converting it to decimal, so 20 divided by 35, and I get this is equal to 0.57. And we have 15 divided by 35, and I get 0.43. Okay, now what is the theoretical probability of throwing heads? This time, theoretical, I am not looking at this information. Instead, I'm just thinking, all right, heads, that's a single, that's the only thing that will be successful is heads. And overall, you can get either heads or tails, so you have two possibilities. There you go, your success divided by your possibilities. So 1/2 is equal to 0.5. And then what is the theoretical probability of throwing tails? Same thing, 1/2, which is equal to 0.5. All right, now let's actually compare these things. Okay, how does theoretical probability compare to experimental probability? Well, there's multiple things we could say about this, right? We could say that the experimental probability experimental probability of heads is higher than theoretical probability. Right? Because 0.57 is a higher number than 0.5. All right, and we could say that experimental probability of tails is lower than theoretical P of tails. right? Because 0.43 is lower than 0.5. Oops. Here, sorry. The other thing we could say is that your theoretical probability, both heads and tails were equally likely, versus on your experimental probability, you had a decent higher chance of getting heads than you did with tails. So maybe you had maybe your quarter was slightly weighted more to one side or something. I don't know. But overall, this comparison is good enough. I'm just saying how to explain that these results don't look as close to these do, right? That's it. So you guys are going to do your own experiments. While you're doing your own experiments, it is very important that for each trial, you mark where something lands, as well as keeping a tally of how many times you do something. So, for example, if I'm doing this same experiment and I toss my coin and I want to go ahead, I throw my coin and the first thing I get is heads. So I'm going to go ahead and mark heads. But I'm also marking something here to the side so that I can keep track of how many times I actually threw something, because it's hard to count both things at the same time. So you're going to mark that. Let's say the second time you also you got heads. So mark it again, mark it again. Third time you got tails. Mark it, mark it. So here I'm keeping track that I have 3 trials total, even though here's 2 and here's 1. Fourth time you got heads again. Fifth time we got tails. You see how that works? All right. So each time something happens, you're going to mark it in the correct column, but you're also going to keep a tally of how often something happens in general.